Pete from PITARS as our chair, moderator. We have Dr. Trish Tegemeier from LANXESS, Emeritus Professor Tony Covington, ICLC, John Hubbard from SATRA, and we don't have Dr. Warren Baldwin. He couldn't make it. He sent his apologies. And at the last minute, Jeffrey Holmes from Lazarus has sprung in, and we thank him for that. He's come all the way from New Zealand. And Jerry from the UK left. Now, the format, Reg will take you through that. We have some pre-scripted questions that have been sent in as we advertise and requested, and I'm sure there'll be a few questions from the floor as well. Reg, please proceed.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everybody. Somebody to like that. Thank you very much. Well, we've been described as the men in black by somebody at the front here, and somebody else pointed out that we're the Chrome 6. And hopefully by the end there'll only be 3 of us, so we'll be the Chrome 3. But we'll see how we go on. We are 2 times Chrome 3, that's a better way of putting it. So thanks for teeing us up like that, Steve. I think there's quite a few pre-questions been handed in to us which we've tried to categorise. But just before I go into them and assume that the audience have covered all the questions, what I'd like to do is open it to the audience at the beginning and say, do you have any burning issues about Chrome 6 that we can add to the agenda? So this is your first open session. Anything that we should be considering as a panel? See, quiet, nobody at all. So we have Peter.
If you laser cut Chrome 3 level, can you get Chrome 6?
Good question. We'll come back to that, but I won't forget it. It's laser etched into my mind.
Right, we also have maybe a facetious point of view, but surely Chrome 6 gets a bad press. But is it all bad?
Okay, I think that's covered in some of the others, generally speaking. Anybody else? We didn't have the laser cut, that's a new one.
I think, Reg, one of the things is how many people are actually harmed by bad use of Chrome in the leather industry. What are the figures on that? Do we have any figures? And how many people have actually been harmed by Chrome 6 Chrome products?
Good question.
I'd like to know what actually happens to Chrome 6 when it enters the environment, say, in waste dump, where you've got strongly anaerobic conditions. How long it actually lasts? How long does it last, say, in waste dump? How long does it last, say, in soil? And what's the effect of lead? What happens if you actually put lead in it? And what happens there? We assume that the Chrome 3 is locked up virtually forever. What actually happens within different conditions in footwear when it's
landfill. Okay. Got that one? Any others? Okay, we'll probably have a window later if anything springs to mind. So I'd like to start with the first question, which has come from Prime Asia, from John Clark. And he says, is there any evidence showing that chrome tan leather more negatively impacts the environment compared to other tanning methods when analysing the full life cycle of leather, including energy, water and chemicals? And I'd like to start that off with Dietrich, if I may.
Yes. I know John, and if he speaks about evidence, he really wants to have scientific evidence, not just some notes. And I personally know 2 studies which I would consider as scientific, which I've read. Maybe there are much more. One is from the BLC in 2007, and one is from the BASF. It was 5 years before, 2002 or 2003. And they compared wet white and aldehyde tanning and chrome tanning in terms of climate impact, energy, water impact, and tox impact. And actually, there are differences, yes. Yeah, in climate, for example, it takes more energy to make a chrome tanning agent. On the other hand, in wet white, you have to use more retanning chemicals. Even they have to be produced, and they have a carbon footprint. So it's more or less a plus and a minus, and maybe a little bit more negative on the side of chrome. Then you have the environmental impact. If you have good standard technologies, it's like in a certified LWG rated tannery, you can make sure that more or less 98 or 99% of the chrome which are in a tanning float can be separated and doesn't come into the environment. If you have these conditions, it's not a problem. Also the CO2 in aldehyde tanning, you have much more retanning chemicals, so your COD load in retanning is higher. But even if you have a good proper wastewater treatment plant, you also can cover this. So therefore I would say this is also more or less even. Then in the TOX profile, if we use chrome 3, it's TOX free, it's not a problem at all. And aldehyde is, you have to be careful if you use it in a tannery, but once it is in the leather, it is also an oligomer and shouldn't become a problem, but therefore overall, if you include the exposure to workers, I would say it's a little bit a disadvantage of glutaraldehyde. And all in all, and that was actually even the conclusion of the BLC, which was a study which was sponsored Chrome 6less from the European Union, was that there are plus and minuses, and overall both are okay from an environmental and from a TOX point of view if you apply proper and good best available technologies. And this is the issue in the industry. I think this will come out later again. The difference between a good and a bad tannery is much, much bigger than between chrome 3 and chrome 6. Yeah? So it's not a matter of the tanning technology, it's a matter of the technology of the process of the respective tannery who is doing either this or either that one.
Thank you very much for that. We then sort of categorize the questions into factual, analytical, testing type questions. And then the other sort of issue is the perception. So there is the customer interaction, the consumer view, the relationship with brands and the brand's concept of chrome. What I'd like to do, if we can, is do the technical stuff at the front end, while we still hold all your attention, and do then the interaction of the interface of the industry with its consumers, and finally come to where the future is. What do we have to do about the situation? So, sort of, to start us off in that, we have a question from Clark's Shoes in Street, from Craig and from Robin. Would we be wrong to think that it is inevitable that you will face a chrome 6 failure in the marketplace when using in excess of 100 million square feet of chrome tan leather per annum in your production? So that's an interesting one. Second point, we tend to see more failures on footwear as opposed to skins or swatches that have been more recently produced, which is presumably indicating the conversion of chrome 3 to chrome 6 over time. What would be recommended best practice in terms of storage time of skins prior to using, assuming routine global storage conditions? So there's two, it links all the way through to buyer's risk and consumer risk. But even though we say it's a really small problem, if you're buying 100 million square feet, is it a risk? So I'd like to ask John to lead us off on that one.
Thank you, Reg. In terms of the inevitability of facing some failures if you're using that quantity of leather, all we can do is look at it's a sort of risk and probability. We've just analysed the chrome 6 analyses that we've carried out at Sartre over the past 16 months or so, so since the beginning of 2015, to see whether we can draw any significant trends. What we're seeing is actually approximately 12.5% failure rate. Now, I'm not going to extrapolate that and assume that 12.5% of all the leather that's produced and that's used worldwide is going to fail with respect to Chrome 6. What I would say is that because of the types of testing we're carried out, we are likely to see more failures than is in the whole industry as a whole. But we've, I think Jeff mentioned earlier that he's seen figures that say that 10 to 15% is what they're looking at. So those figures seem reasonable. But that doesn't mean that if you are working with tanneries that are working at the highest level, you will get that amount or even close to that amount of failure.
Well, not really, just to say that the 10 to 15% was not from our testing, but was from testing done by CTC. So I think in Europe there's a lot more emphasis on the Chrome 6 investigations, and obviously these are not particularly leathers that are just random samples from production, they're ones where there's some concern. So I think that's why there's a skewing towards the 10 to 15%. Typically we've been testing leathers now for a couple of companies for maybe a year or so, and we've been doing the aged Chrome test as well, which is mentioned a bit later in some other questions. And we've had 0 failures in that program for the last sort of 5-6 months. So we're pretty confident that any good quality leather production doesn't lead towards Chrome 6 generation.
Okay, can I just ask you both as well about the question about storage? So the leather produced is fine. The tannery is a good tannery. You sent the leather into your supplier, your shoemaker. Should an end buyer be worried about the conditions of that leather? What do we know about that supply chain, if anything?
Most of the work we have done has been on final product. We do see some swatches, but often they're swatches that have been produced in the Far East, so they will have had transport by the time that we see them. Again, probably coming back to some work that CTC have done on the natural aging of leather, and they have tried to produce leathers, some of which will deliberately form Chrome 6 to try and work out what are the key factors in there. And when they produce leathers to the highest best practice industry standards, those leathers, even under very forced conditions, were not seen to produce Chrome 6 in testing. But when they produce leathers which they deliberately took steps to think about what might induce Chrome 6, they did find that light and heat had an effect, and that could be part of the exposure.
And in this study, also clearly has been shown that humidity has a huge impact. That even came out in the CTC study, which was a PhD work, which will be published pretty soon. That a leather which was produced in order to find Chrome 6. Yeah? If you store it below 35% of humidity, then you see an increase of Chrome 6. And if the humidity goes up above 35%, then actually the Chrome 6 goes down below 3 ppm. And in this report, there's also a scientific report from a Swedish professor, I think she is. The conclusion was not done right, because in a shoe you always have above 35% humidity. Yes, even if you have a shoe now which has maybe 10 ppm of Chrome 6, yeah, the sweat where you're extracting this is already in the pH which reduced the Chrome 6 to the Chrome 3. But even in a shoe itself, the humidity is definitely this could be measured, and it is measured, yeah, above 35% humidity, and therefore it should be on the safe side in this reversible. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Could I move us on to the test method? Because there are several different very long questions about test method. Should it be age? Shouldn't it be? Do we have the right test method? What is the future of the test method? Does that make the problem worse if the test is more accurate, or does it make it better? So again, on the panel, I think the two people will lead that will again be John and Jeff. So let's swap it around. Let's go to Jeff first.
Okay, well, the biggest concern, one of these questions was actually sent by me before I realised I was going to be put on the panel. It was really to question the ageing process, because there's been quite a lot of discussion, especially at the IULTCS, at the IUR meeting, I believe, yes, about the method, and it's been stalled at the moment because of something to do with the footwear group, but essentially we and a few other test houses have been doing age testing on chrome leathers for a while at a condition that's been asked for, which is 80 degrees C for 24 hours. There's some question mark, as Diedrich mentions, about humidity, and there shouldn't really be any airflow through the equipment when you're doing the aging. So, but what we've seen is there are some leathers with certain fat liquor choices which can lead to some issues. So there are some leathers that do have problems on aging, but if you control that, and I think there are ways of controlling it, it may not be a major issue. And as I say, we've done work with the people who had this problem, and they've got no issue now. So there are methods to overcome the issue, but there are certain chemicals that are used post-tanning that you have to be a little bit careful of. Some of it's surprising, so there's more room for research, I believe, in this area. But I'm just wondering when this method comes in. It's going to be in the standard 17075 method that customers can ask for aging to be carried out. So we've just got to be aware of the problem and how to avoid generating Chrome 6. So that's what I see.
Well, the important point to start from is that the entry in Annex 17 of REACH that makes no mention of leather being aged. It is basically the leather product that is placed on the market. So aging is not a requirement in terms of REACH, but it's obviously important in terms of people considering their risk assessment and approach to general product safety. In the CEN TC289, the European Committee for Leather, they have got a joint working group with the working group on footwear to try and define an appropriate aging protocol. So rather than having a protocol developed by the Leather Committee and one developed by the Footwear Committee, they're trying to work together to get one that meets the needs of both industries. There is also going to be a second part to ISO 17075, which uses ion chromatography as opposed to the colorimetric method that's used in part 1. This is expected to be more accurate and more sensitive. And that leads us on to the next question, which is, if there is greater sensitivity, is that going to be a good thing for the industry? Because there is pressure that the 3 milligrams per kilogram limit in the report that was published to support the Annex 17 entry, they did say that the 3 milligrams per kilogram limit was actually higher than the no observable effect limit, and so there is pressure on that limit to go down, and if we have a more sensitive test method, will that be driving down the legislation requirements?
That sounds a bit gloomy, actually, that the situation is a real situation for us, and it sounds like progress could mean it gets worse before it gets better. If we just sort of broaden it a little bit now to sort of other issues, side issues, we have a question about combustion. So if you take chrome leathers and you burn them, you know, you have this risk of chrome 6, but is it a very, very minute risk, or is it a real risk? And that also links to if the combusted products are then buried, and that links to a question earlier, in effectively landfill or anaerobic conditions, what is the future thought process around that, or the risk around that?
It's a very difficult question.
The answer to this is it depends. If you take the extremes, for example, if you have high pH, high temperature, excess oxygen, then you get 100% conversion, because that's the way you convert chromite ore to chromium-6 chemicals, and hence you get all the chromium-3 chemicals. So that has to be efficient. On the other hand, if you do it with no oxygen, as Richard Haverkamp has done in New Zealand, then you finish up with chromium carbide, which is a chromium-3 salt. So, if you want partial conversion, then you go somewhere in between those two limits. In terms of burying stuff that has got chrome-6 in it, it depends. It depends on exactly what is the state of the material that you've buried in the landfill. Because it's a heterogeneous reaction, it's not a nice simple reaction in solution. It depends on getting the reactants together. So if you've got a tiny amount of chrome-6 deep in a thick piece of chrome leather, then it may take months for the reductant to penetrate into the leather and do the job. It depends. It depends on getting the reactants together, so it depends on the physical state of the material that you bury.
The ash of an incineration is so toxic, regardless if there is chrome-6 in or not. Yeah, you have so many electronic trash and whatever, all that what comes into a waste, into an incineration plant. Yeah? This ash is a special hazardous waste which has to be treated as it, and if there is chrome-6 in or not, it doesn't matter at all. And there are stuff in dioxins and whatever which is much more dangerous than the chrome-6. And if you do a gasification, for example, from shavings, then you get as an ash only chrome-3. Even this is studied. And a company like us, we are selling chrome tanning salts. We would be happy to take this ash. We tried this also out, but unfortunately today our chrome plant is in South Africa. We can't do this tourism of ash. That is by regulation not possible. Yeah? But in principle, there would be a good recycling solution, yeah, to do this. And if it goes in the environment, the lowest energy state is chrome-3 oxide, and it will somehow go to chrome-3 oxide, and then it is there as it was before, taken out of the earth as chrome oxide, and it is a stable condition. So even there, I don't see the problem.
Thank you. Clear answer to that one. Can we go to Peter's question? If people laser etch leather, chrome leather, does that increase the risk of chrome-6?
Don't know. I guess it depends to some extent on the leather, exactly how it's made, but it also is going to depend on the temperatures that are created as the laser cuts. And the higher the pH, the higher the temperature in the presence of oxygen is possible.
Johnny, what high pH are you talking about? We're talking about 4?
Well, there's a guideline here that Dietrich has put up for the end for the end of processing. I think anything above 7 is likely to be visited. But I don't know for certain.
It's not black and white.
Yeah.
It's going, the risk is going higher as higher the pH goes.
Okay, simple question, difficult answer. Another simple question from Amanda. There are many cleaning companies offering ozone treatments to deodorize and kill mold spores in leather products. How likely is ozone to create chrome-6 in chrome tan leather products? Is this ozone treatment safe to use on leather? Sounds again simple question.
I would say it's highly risky. You've got a very powerful oxidizing agent in ozone. It's about as powerful as you could get, and we know that chrome-3 can be oxidized to chrome-6. I would have thought that was a very high-risk operation.
I just might add a bit of balance to that. We also have to bear in mind that ozone has a very short half-life, and I suspect, I don't know, I suspect it wouldn't penetrate through leather very well. The other thing we have to remember is if you're treating a mouldy piece of leather, in order to have mould, you have to have a relative humidity of over 70%. So therefore, we already have a condition which doesn't favour the production of chrome-6. So I'm not saying it wouldn't happen, I'm saying perhaps it's something that needs to be looked at. But it might be the answer is to sell mouldy leather, I don't know.
Interesting. Again, we don't quite know, do we? More work to be done. Another one from Amanda. Is there a spot test that can be used to detect the presence of chrome-6? Practical question.
No.
There used to be in the glove, PPE gloving standard, a spot test, in as much as that it was a very quick colour change, and if it changed colour, you then had to carry out the full chrome-6 analysis, but it was not a non-destructive test. So you still had to grind your leather and extract it as if you were doing a pH of leather. So it wasn't something you just something to spot onto a piece of leather, a corner of a piece of leather, and it would indicate whether there's chrome-6 there. So there were simpler tests that we used that can no longer be used because they're not sensitive enough to get down to 3 ppm. So that's when the level was 10 ppm.
There is a test, for example, for metallurgic applications, yeah, the chromated screws. Yeah? That is a spot test which works, but it works only on metal and on hard surfaces. Yeah? And in a leather where you have dye stuffs and where you have all these other chemicals, yeah, the uncertainty is so high that you don't get a good result.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to dermatitis, dermatology. You know, there is a concept that chrome is a skin sensitizer. There is a question referring to some prior work that said it's no greater a skin sensitizer than other alternative tanning solutions. Is that true? Isn't it true? What are your views around sensitivity to chrome tanning?
Yeah, which also answer one of the questions of this auditorium: how big is the impact? Yeah, how many people really got affected? Yeah. So we don't have a problem with carcinogenicity because it's only by inhalation. Yeah. So we don't have a problem with toxicity. Yeah, because but we have an issue in the leather industry with allergic reaction, with hypersensitivity. Yeah? And studies which we know have been taken 5% of the population. That means have a positive, have reacted positive on this. This is 5%. Out of these 5, and you have to say these people which are were investigated were not normal people. That were people who had a potential to allergic reactions. Yeah, so it was already a risky selection. And out of these 5% which reacted on leather, 20%, that means 1% in the whole, was allergic against chrome. The other one had a leather allergy because of I don't know, biocide or the retaining agents or whatever is in, you know. And therefore it is relatively small compared to other allergic things, you know. I mean, many people are allergic against food, against hay fever and whatever. And even the impact there is much more dangerous than with Chrome 6. If I would have a Chrome 6 allergy, I just would wear socks and everything would be fine. Yeah.
Just to add, we have seen cases where we have associated actual dermatological reactions in users, whereas along that matched up with high Chrome 6 levels in the leather, but it's at least 10 times higher than the limit. So we're not talking 3 ppm, we're talking about 30 ppm. That's not, they weren't necessarily allergic reactions, and I think there is important to sort of distinguish between those people who have a reaction to high levels of Chrome 6 and people who are allergic to leather. Even though they may have been sensitized by Chrome 6, they tend to then react to presence of Chrome 3.
Addition, there are numbers, so many people are allergic against Chrome 6. The test kit has 5,000 ppm. Yeah, when they put the test kit on, and if they say they are allergic or not. So this is 5,000 ppm, and therefore 1 to 3% of the population reacts then on this positive. You know, I mean, this is a dimension higher or 2 dimensions higher from that what even in a bad leather would be.
Okay. Slight side issue here. There is this is from Steve. There is a concept that the Chrome 6 issue is related to the free chrome that's left in the leather, rather than the chrome that's substantively bound to the fibre structure. Is that true or not?
Okay, I was invited because we do a lot in terms of chrome. So yes, this is investigated, and we can really clearly say no, there is no direct link. Of course, it would be good to minimize the amount of unbonded chrome in the leather. That's for sure. But you see a lot of, you can see a leather with a, let's say, high amount of leachable chrome. That means 500, 700 ppm, and which has a very low Chrome 6 risk. And you can have a leather with a very low amount of free chrome, and which has a higher risk on Chrome 6. So there is no direct link. There is no direct link.
Okay, so sort of summarising where we are so far, it's actually quite a complicated subject, this one, and there are genuine issues. The overall that I would take from it is that if you're approaching it sensibly, professionally, thoroughly, with the knowledge that we have, then actually we can manage this problem very, very well. If you don't manage it correctly, professionally, and you go off in an ad hoc fashion, then there is genuinely a problem. So I think that's the sort of conclusion so far. It's still a work in progress, but it's not an absolutely disastrous position. Sorry, Christine, do you want to ask a question before I ask?
No, correct.
Yeah. Okay. So that brings us to the next crunch question, which is, does the panel foresee a market shift away from chrome tanning as a result of the increasing regularity, sorry, I'll have a drink later, controls on chrome? If so, in what direction and over what time period? So underneath that question is chrome okay or not, guys? If you're saying it's okay to us, what are the underlying guidelines that we have to understand if we're going to continue to use it? Leads Dietrich to your little master list here.
Yeah. Maybe before, do we see a shift or not? We had this discussion also here with your company. There are many, many brands which have already approved articles based on chrome-free leather, but they are not converting and they're not switching because they have a problem in their marketing story. You know, if they have 20 articles, yeah, and they want to sell 2 articles which are free of chrome, and they make all the good stories about this, it automatically says that the other 8 articles are not okay, yeah, and therefore either they have to switch completely or not. And this is something which, in the moment, I think is the reason why there is no shift, you know. And I'm really interested to see how it continues in the future. Yeah. In general, yes. Even this is now even known with normal and standard operation conditions. Yeah, you can make Chrome, as you said, which fulfills the aging test, which fulfills all other tests, and is below 3 ppm. In the automotive industry, they are, I know from OEMs, they have measured since 10 years and they haven't even seen a failure. And that is, the reason is because the tanneries which are producing automotive leather operated already a long time ago on a very high standard. They have a high sophisticated operation, and if you follow the 10 rules which we have put together with cuts, yeah. So let's go quickly through use of good CTS. Yeah, there is CTS, as mentioned before. If you have a chrome ore, you have to convert it first into chrome 6. Actually, then you have pure chrome 6, and then afterwards you reduce it back to chrome 3 to make the CTS. So if a company is not operating well, there is certainly a risk that there is a certain amount of chrome 6 in the CTS salt, in the chrome tannic salt. We are selling more than 100,000 tons of CTS, and I can guarantee you each batch is tested and only gets delivered and gets a certificate if there is no detectable chrome 6. So it's possible, and but you have to look from where that you buy this from a decent supplier. So of course avoid chromated pigments. Another rule is, in South America, it's pretty common to bleach the wet blue. If you bleach it, what Tony said, yeah, put a strong oxidation agent in, then there is always a risk to create some chrome 6. And the number 4 rule is, I think, the most important one. That is a substitution of fat liquors with a lot of unsaturated groups. These fat liquors, the number of unsaturated groups easily can be determined by a iodic test, the iodic number. So ask your fat liquor supplier that this is a fat liquor which has a very low number. Yeah, then avoid the use of ammonia in the retanning, the use of use always batch 10. I had a nice chat with Nigel in the break. I was asking him how much of the, we have heard these 120 or 110,000 tons of veg 10, and he estimates nearly 80%, you said, is used for retanning. Yeah? Add the 2 or 3% veg in the retanning recipe. This is some kind of inbuilt insurance, because the chrome 6 formation always goes over a radical, and the veg is capturing this, and then before the chrome 3 gets oxidized, the radical is already destroyed. So this is something which is very, very important, and yeah, minimize the unfixed chrome. This has nothing to do with chrome 6. This is in general, I think, a very important thing, and I believe leaching of chrome in general will become more and more a topic. And then end up with a low pH at the end of the tanning wet end process. That is the last rule, but even in the neutralization. And mold, yes, mold is also something which can generate chrome 6 out of chrome 3. So you have to have a good protection of your wet blue and even maybe of your final leather, that no mold can be there.
Thank you for that. Christine?
Yeah, I've got 2 things really. Going back to your Dietrich's point there about how the actual chrome tannin salts are produced, are there still pockets anywhere in the world where people still use the old 2-bar you know, in situ production methods that we're aware of. Because that was one thing, I mean, that was a historic way, wasn't it, of actually making your own chrome solution.
Yeah, it was a side product out of vitamin production. Yeah, that was as then Chrome 6 was used as a reduction agent. Yeah, so it got reduced to Chrome 3, and then they had a side product which was then the Chrome tanning salt. But there are, I think that's becoming too complicated. There are different ores also in the world, you know, and the best ore is in South Africa. And if you go to Kazakhstan and in these areas, the ore is more difficult to convert without generating the Chrome 6 or let's say yeah, to get it Chrome 6 free, the Chrome tanning salt. So it also depends a little bit of the origin, but as I said, the final step in the CTS production, the reduction of Chrome 6 to Chrome 3, if this is done properly, then you can be sure that no Chrome 6 is detectable in the powder or in the liquid.
Yeah, the second one was slightly different, actually pretty right to Tony. You know, as an industry, we're constantly being criticised on every level for everything if we don't defend ourselves. While I think today there's been some fantastic information coming out, it's still obvious we've got lots of gaps in our knowledge, and I would sort of wonder if somebody could summarise at the moment what are the most important gaps that we need to do further research so that we can categorically.
We haven't finished the ballot.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks for queuing us in. That is exactly the next phase we're going into. So I'll buy you a drink later as well. Just before that, I think the conclusion at this stage is, provided the chrome tanning is done correctly with the right supply chain, managed by professional people, this is a manageable risk. Full stop. End of story. So earlier on, yes, there are issues, there's concerns, there's anxieties, there's worries. But quite sincerely, just as everything else in life, if it's done correctly, professionally, through the right supply chain, it's perfectly manageable to do this. Just before we move to the future, there was one other question, which was, so what happens if somebody does get something stopped at immigration, coming through the customs into Germany, and there's a container load of stuff failed?
Yeah, that was the question.
What can you do about it?
Yeah, there is a possibility. If a container gets, let's say, tested by a brand, yeah, and coming into Europe, and they find Chrome 6, there is a possibility. There are companies out, and they are coming, and I guess, getting more and more. Yeah, there is one in Netherlands. Iran reconditioning it's called, and you can send the container to them, and they put some humidity on it, they put some reducing agents on it. Yeah, it's no magic at all, and then afterwards the brand can send the container again to a test, and it will be okay. Yeah, so this is also possible. Yeah, that and up to now, this is still legal and this is still okay. Then afterwards, the brand can sell it. Yeah, and if a government is testing even in a store the leather, yeah, there's these examples when one shoe is in the window and the other shoe is in the box, in the dark box in the black back of the shop, you know. And then they take the shoe out of the window and they see some and they find some Chrome 6 because it's some kind of an aging, that is this typical thing, you know. The sun comes in and it's dry and so on. And the other pair, the half of the pair in the box has no Chrome 6. That's what happens, you know. Up to now, it's not that this brand has to recall the entire batch where this shoe is in. Yeah, he's just not allowed to sell this single pair of shoe. That is how it is handled right now, and yeah, that is.
So there is a solution. Don't panic is the answer. Yeah. Okay, looking forward then, if I sort of make the bridge at this point with the next question, which is, what can be done to fight the emotional arguments by brands and consumers against the use of chrome in leather even when we have safe and scientifically sound leather manufacturing systems in most of the world's tanneries. So linking to what you're saying, okay guys, we get it, we know where we are. What's the future? What are we going to do about it? And what's the roadmap, what's the plan from here on in? And with that, I'd like to ask Kerry to outline your view of the situation.
I'm going to start with a question. How many people in the room have heard of the Change Your Shoes campaign? Okay. Not many. For those who don't know, the Change Your Shoes campaign is an EU-funded campaign. 3.5 million euros being given by the European Commission to a 16 NGO, 8-country consortium with the nobly stated view of ensuring transparency in the shoe manufacture supply chain. What they're actually campaigning for is, one of their objectives, is the complete removal of chrome from leather manufacture. And if you go and have a look at their website, it's quite amusing. There's a lot of very misguided, I won't call it information on there. However, given the European spread of this particular campaign and the money involved, and the fact that this audience hasn't heard of it, we can be fairly certain that the average consumer has never heard of it. And I think as far as the consumer generally is concerned, they are glad to be oblivious to most of what is going on in the world. It's not the consumer we need to deal with. The issue remains, and has been for some time, I think, in my opinion, the brands. Our customers, our direct customers, who are creating the pressure. They're responsible for MRSLs and RSLs and all the other compliance issues that we're faced with. And they are being driven by the NGOs. We think of people like Greenpeace. To address these people, we can't mess about with people like Greenpeace. They're well informed, they're well funded, and they're very, very vocal. What we need is to fill the gaps that Christine's alluded to earlier on. And we have a lot of questions over the test method and the reliability of the test method. We have questions over even the generation of Chrome 6 and how it's generated in leather, and what mechanisms can be used to control it. So the answer for us, obviously, is we have to face the problem. We have to make sure that we fully understand the problem, and then we have to transmit that information to our direct customers, because if they're happy, everyone else will be happy. So we need information. The brands want certainty that they are not going to be held up in the spotlight by people like Greenpeace. And at the moment, I think it's probably fair to say that we can't give them certainty. In scientific terms, you can never give them certainty, but we can reduce the probabilities and the risk factors. So we need to do more work. And fortunately, one thing that we will be doing shortly, starting in September, is a PhD placement here at the university, which is funded by the leather sellers. Which will address just the questions I've outlined. We will be looking at the reliability of the method and alternatives. There is obviously a political sensitivity there that if we come up with a method which can detect it down to 3 parts per billion, we may not want to talk about it. But the questions over the existing method may be answered one way or the other. We will also be looking at the mechanisms of evolution of Chrome 6 in leather and the factors involved and possible solutions for that. And I'm going to pass over to Tony now to expand on that because he knows what he's talking about.
Okay, what we want to do is to sort out this problem once and for all. I think there's always been a big question mark over the testing and analysis for Chrome 6. Essentially because every method that we use is based on wet chemistry. And that means there's going to be a problem of contamination with air. It's all the methods simply tweak at the edges of the problem. And it doesn't really matter how much you tweak at it. How do you know that the answers that you're getting are accurate? You're still using wet chemistry. By what method can you ratify that your analytical technique is good, is sound, is accurate? What we need is a method of ratifying the test procedure. What we are proposing to do is to throw every advanced analytical technique at the problem. We want to know how we can analyze for the presence of small amounts of chromium 6 and the presence of a large amount of chromium 3. but we don't want to use wet chemistry. We don't want to use methods that rely on the chemistry of the outermost electrons, because those are the ones that come in and out, where you get the redox shifting between chrome 3 and chrome 6. We want to use methods that are dependent on nuclear properties, on the innermost electron shell properties. So we'll be using magnetic resonance, X-ray techniques, neutron diffraction, anything that we can think of, magnetic moment, you name it, we'll have a go at it. In the hopes that we're going to find a technique that we can use to ratify test methods. We're not suggesting that every tannery should have access to the nearest synchrotron. It's not practical, but we do want to ratify, to validate test methods. We also want to find out, is it a problem? Have we got a problem, or is there no problem? If there's no problem, then that's it, we can forget about it. If there is a problem, how big is the problem, and how can we deal with it, and how can we know that we've dealt with the problem? So, as Kerry says, we're hoping to get this off the ground in the autumn. The project will be supervised by Will Wise, who's waving his hand in the air. He will be the first supervisor and the primary point of contact. So, we will accept any offers of help, data input, whatever. This is not just a doctoral problem, this is a global problem. And we want to use everything in our power to solve it.
Thank you, Tony. So, you take the order. I think in summary, because we've got literally 2 or 3 minutes left, and I'll get my brownie points for finishing on time, which is good news. There is an issue, but we do understand it. It is a global issue. We have all the right brains and people on it, and I think we understand the best practice now for the industry. We have not yet solved some of the fine detail and some of the funding and focus of attention. It's good to hear we have a wise man on the project, as we say. So I think the future, our knowledge will grow and grow and grow. It still leaves us with the other aspect, which is the communication, the perception, the confidence of the brands and the consumers. And I think we're in a better place than we were last year or the year before, where there was a lot of fear running through the industry. But I do appeal for much more collaboration globally across the industry and across all the scientific heads of research and the press, the communication channels, that we get on the front foot of communicating. We are responsible suppliers. We are also consumers ourselves, and we do want to do a good job. But we need everybody, I think, to work together, continue with the good work that's been done so far, and get us in a better place than where we are today. And I think that's exactly 1 hour. So thank you for your contribution. Thanks very much from me to the panel for being very professional and thorough.